Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Hattie Hawks.
Hey.
I'm so glad to be with you again.
I am too. This is always good.
Yeah. So, when we were meeting, because we did the episode a month or so ago, and then we had this meeting afterwards, and I was thinking we were going to go in whatever direction, like what could be a second episode, something to kind of launch what you're going to be doing on the podcast as a guest host. And then you brought something up, and I'm going, we've never done that before.
I love to be the person who brings up those ideas.
Well, you definitely hit it well there. And it was sort of like, my initial thought was just say thank you. Because it really was really brilliant. And what we're going to do today for our audience is Hattie took one of our assessments, our main EQ assessment, and we're going to kind of go over what came out from that assessment for you. And for those in the audience as well, our process for doing assessments is you take the assessment, you have a debrief of your results with someone like me, a practitioner, and then you're on your way. And typically in our world, there's a coaching engagement that goes on for 6, 9, 12 months or what have you. Or some folks, it's a one-off type thing. Mm-hmm. But in your case, Hattie, you were so kind, as well as it was a great idea to go, wow, wouldn't it be great for the audience to kind of know what I experienced and how it went and what went. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, also because we value privacy, we're not going to go into every single detail of your assessment because quite frankly, that might be boring too to try to do on a podcast.
I have a great story. I don't know.
Nah, but if we're going to go where we go, but
sure.
Primarily what we're going to focus in on is what impacted you most from the assessment after taking it, after getting debriefed. And then we're going to kind of touch on some things that really, I think we both agreed, could be very powerful for the audience as well. So are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do this.
Perfect. All right. So the audience, you maybe do not know exactly the structure of this particular assessment report. So don't worry, stick with us because the flow of this will kind of go with what you would see if you took an assessment with us.
Right.
Okay? So basically, I'm going to kind of go at it from this angle. When we do an assessment, it measures things like competencies, and there's another area that we call success factors. So maybe you could think of it in terms of there's 4 success factors and there's 8 competencies in the model that we measure, right? And then from there, the report allows you to kind of dig deep and go where you feel like you want to go, right? What resonated most? What do you want to work on? How do you want to improve, grow, et cetera, et cetera? So, Hattie, with that in mind, let's start with success factors.
All right, let's do it.
Now, if you remember, the success factors, there are 4 of them. 2 are kind of above the surface as it relates to as a human being, meaning it's outward, it's what the world would see.
Okay.
And then there's 2 that are internal, right? So effectiveness and relationships are those external ones, right? And then well-being and quality of life are the ones that are internal. One of the things that really was kind of eye-opening, I think, for you was how strong your quality of life score was.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
It was, I was excited to see that.
Okay, that's a great place to camp for a minute. Excited to see that because you had been working on it? Exciting because you weren't sure how it was going to turn out? Or how did that
Because for the last few years, if you were to ask me how my quality of life was, I mean, more than likely, I'm going to think about how to compare it to the rest of my life.
Right.
And I would say that it was not as good. Like, if anything, I would say some days were just downright poor. And it was a struggle to maintain a quality of life. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that I didn't struggle before.
Right.
It just means that I was able to maintain a more positive mindset despite my challenges then.
Ooh.
And this time it was in like a sensory overload, an overwhelming amount of responsibilities and undercutting in my close connections. And so overall, there were a lot of things about my life that were so different and weren't necessarily, I don't want to say not in line with my values, but they just weren't where I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And so to see that it is improving because I have been intentional, I know that I have to improve that overall sense of well-being so that I can be the person that I want to be, the mother that I want to be, and like the partner, the friend, because I have in my own mind, like I have felt more of a failure in these areas in recent years than I had in the past.
Gotcha. So what I also thought was interesting is that you went to that particular factor, success factor, over the others, and it wasn't your lowest. And I say it that way because as human beings, what we typically find, people go directly to what's my lowest score, right?
Yeah.
But you went to that one immediately. So obviously there was something there that resonated, and you explained that well. So within that, also, I think when we went through these other factors, the well-being score was your lowest, and you said that resonated because you believed it to be true, right? And for the audience as well, and I didn't say this at the beginning, our assessments are self-reporting. So in many ways, it's a message from Hattie to Hattie about where things are at, right?
Yeah.
And as long as the person that takes the assessment is practicing self-honesty, answering from, okay, this is how I feel about it, recognizing it's the last 3 to 6 months, a snapshot in time, the accuracy of it is pretty powerful.
Right. And like that's honestly why I wanted to be able to share my assessment, not just because I'm just, it's just part of coming up with a good idea for a podcast, but because these kinds of things are really hard for people to recognize. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have with right now is our inability to be honest with ourselves. We like to talk ourselves out of things. We like to, whether it's talk ourselves up from having done something that we're not happy or proud of ourselves for, or if it's just not being kind enough to ourselves about something. I want my assessment just to be, I'm able to talk about these things honestly, and I think everybody else should be too. But at the end of the day, you really only have to be honest with yourself to have a better life.
And Hattie, you wouldn't know this because what you just said resonates because of a recent awakening I've been having around this idea about what is it that you truly want. And I think in many respects, that's where that self-honesty piece really comes into play, because I have found that if I'm not careful, because I'm an empath, I'm taking on your emotional energy. I want to be right there in the midst of you dealing with it. And it's easy to forget, like, who do you think you are, Eric? This is not yours.
Yeah.
And the understanding that if it's not mine, then Hattie, I should summon the courage to say, Hattie, this is not mine to carry for you. Versus, but I feel I need to, and then all of a sudden, move. I can do it for you, Hattie. Right?
I appreciate the way that you like the way you said it was. Who do you think you are, Eric? Which some would say, well, that's not talking to yourself very kindly. But you're recognizing that the place that you're coming from when you're absorbing someone's emotions isn't necessarily the place of really wanting to support them. More of it's you feel like you have the ability to take it.
Right. Exactly.
And I and there's no shame around that at all, because I mean, I think a lot of us, they call them fixers. I was raised by one, and I have lots in my, we all gravitate to wanting to, whether it is to help other people or is it to just you're like, wait, I can see this. Please just do what I say.
Yeah, well, and I think
you.
it's about the being honest with yourself about what it is you can do, what it is you're responsible for, and what it is that you're not.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about your lowest score within the success factors, which is well-being. What was most striking or thought-provoking about that score? I mean, if I remember correctly, again, you said, "Yep, that makes sense."
It made sense that it was on the lower side,
Yep.
and because I having complex PTSD. I would say that kind of automatically puts you into a bucket where you're going to struggle with your well-being because you can't. It's hard to stay present. That at its core, the biggest problem with what I have struggled with at least is the ability to be here, be now, be present, and to just kind of go with your day and show up in your day as it presents itself. You spend a lot of time thinking about the past. You spend a lot of time worrying about the future and what's going to happen.
Yep.
And so I know a lot of that turmoil is all within my own mind. It doesn't have anything to do with a lot of the outside factors. But I also had those. I have my family. They live outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I don't have any immediate family in Ohio. I have had to deal with family court for the last few years, which even if you have a run-of-the-mill experience, it's incredibly stressful. It does take up mental space, and it does impact the way that you think.
Yeah.
I've also been on the side of psychological abuse. So I've had to really navigate that path between healing it and also advocating for myself within the criminal court system. So I've had to go and I've had to give testimony for things that happened to me. And all the while, I have my children who are now 3 and 6. And that age, I think so many parents can relate to it being really difficult already.
Yeah.
But you add in some of the complexities that I never expected to have in my life. And so overall, I was pretty unprepared, even though I research everything. I look up everything. I go into things most of the time feeling as if I am prepared for it. But when you actually have to walk through it, it is so much more challenging than just keep your head down, keep going, and keep moving towards light. Now, that is what I told myself, and that did help, but it does not change the weight that you accrue as you go along that path.
Would you say that the twists and turns, the unexpected, the surprises made you realize that, no, this is not going to just be a linear path?
Yes, that was, I certainly hoped that it was going to be a linear path, even though, Instagram has been my friend through this whole thing. It started the healing process before I really understood what it was.
Right.
Algorithms are not good for everything, but man, it came through for me. It really did help. And I knew that it wasn't going to be that way. So in my mind, I was always preparing for something that was going to pop up. I remember in high school, we had this saying, expect the unexpected. And that seemed to really ring true for me here.
Yeah.
And you can expect things to happen, and you still, when they happen, you're like, okay, well, now how am I really going to deal with this? Because it doesn't feel how I had prepared for.
Oh my gosh.
You can prepare all day.
Yeah. And your example is so true on so many levels, because I can say from personal experience of dealing with our healthcare system, when you have a physician or a surgeon of whom you hold at pretty high esteem of being an expert, a knowledge, that kind of thing. And when they're going, I don't know.
Yeah. That's like a safety net kind of just starting to move out from underneath.
Well, you know what it feels like? It feels like, go ahead and get up on the trapeze.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a net.
Right.
But you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing if you have a choice in the matter, but when it is, yes, you do have to do it, you kind of go, okay, I gotta climb the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up 50 feet, and I'm not someone who's never been on a trapeze, But I realized there's a true value in having a net.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yes.
Right?
Something to catch you when you will no doubt fall in some ways because you do. There are always setbacks.
Oh my gosh. And Hattie, when you actually do fall and you hit ground.
Yeah.
And I know I'm speaking for me alone, and not alone in the sense that I know I'm the only one that's gone through it, but I'm speaking for me in my experience of when I have hit the ground. You know, one of the first thoughts that came, it didn't kill me.
Yeah.
It hurt. Yes, it hurt.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Okay. I can get up.
Mm-hmm.
I can move.
Mm-hmm.
There's something liberating in the experience of that. And I think your recognition, kind of going back to your score and that success factor, that recognition of it. Because sometimes, Hattie, I don't think we want answers so desperately all the time. I know this. Mm-hmm. Our technology, AI, just tell me. Yeah. Just give it to me.
In specific detail.
Yeah, right?
With the schedule to follow.
Thank you, right? But the reality of there are certain times in this experience we call life that it's not going to go that way. Yeah. And your ability to kind of navigate accordingly, very inspiring. All right. One of the things that we have found with clients that have scores in success factors, or generally speaking, is that we will say to them, okay, in your case, it was a little bit different because, again, you went to something that was more positive before you went to the one that was the lower, right? Or you went to the higher score versus the lower, is this idea of curiosity. Instead of beating oneself up about how you had hoped the score were going to be different. Mm-hmm. I've kind of joked with many clients that, I've got some news for you.
Good news or bad news? Which one do you want first? Yeah.
So the good news is, if your score is low, you don't lose anything. Nobody's going to take anything from you. You don't get some kind of mark. And maybe it's bad news. If you have a super high score, there's not going to be any awards.
Yeah.
No one's going to bring in the cameras and celebrate you. Because ultimately it's, again, a message from you to you about where you're at. The key thing is, can we be curious at a level to go, I wonder what, I wonder how, I wonder why. And just allow curiosity to be the takeover so that you can kind of go, oh, because Hattie, as we were just talking, it's like what you just said, that connects to be curious about that, Eric. Unfold that a little bit more because those clues might be the thing that leads you to the breakthrough that you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of what we've seen as a strategy that you can use when you take this assessment to move it forward beyond just, again, looking at the information.
Right. And I would honestly, the way I approach the assessment is I wanted to be as honest as possible because what is better than actually having a roadmap when you don't know what to do? You are wanting to figure out what's going on with you internally. That's the reason. And you want to be more successful. You want to feel better about yourself. You want to have a better overall quality of life. These are things that what's better than your overall quality of life? That's it, Yeah. That's the main thing. And so if you're going to lie on the assessment or just lie to yourself, it's only holding you back.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about this before recording, about this idea of that honesty relating to how we tell ourselves lies, right? And we talked about, the house, we choose to build it on sand or we build it on rock, You use the three little pigs, which I thought was fabulous. Yeah. I really resonated with that. There's this reality, regardless of what analogy or word picture you have, that sometimes I think our society allows us to create this facade that everything is awesome, everything is great. And I liken the house thing just because, visually I can go, oh, look at that beautiful house. Look at that. Look at the window treatments. Look at the landscaping. All of those different things.
It's what we aspire to a lot, especially in our country.
Right? Yeah. It's a good association. And then you look at that beautiful house, and then someone says, "Did you know they built that on sand?" And you'd go, "Are you kidding me? No way." Yeah. Because we all know, right? You build a house on sand, what kind of storm
is going to take it away? Yeah.
I'll take it away. Hattie, you and I have talked about this offline. We both have had those experiences. And our audience, if you've been with us any time, you know my story. We've done that, right? What do you say to that person, maybe in the audience, that says, well, yeah, I guess I kind of did do that? I mean, I know you don't have answers for everybody's individual story, but talk about it from that perspective, because I think this idea of honesty is important.
Well, first I'd be like, same.
I'm in your tribe.
I've done that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that you would do that, because that's what a lot of people do. We tend to not be, and this is no one's fault. It's just, we don't tend to be overly intentional about life in and of itself. And
I'm interrupting you, but you just hit on something. Is that rooted, do you think, in this idea of like, well, this is what I should do?
Yes.
This is what I should say. This is where I should live. Should
is the worst word. Should. I remember my therapist, like years ago, I said something with a should. I'm sure I did that all the time. And she said something along the lines of like, in a relationship, like you're going to should your way out of it. Like you're gonna something along those lines. I can't remember the exact words. And honestly, it was what I needed to hear to just really change that frame of thinking, because it was so prominent. Oh, I should call this person back. But you don't have time to do that. You have a million other things that you have to do. You want to talk to them, but you know that if you don't get these other things done, you're not even going to be able to have that conversation. I should be able to answer my workplace and do what they ask me to when they need me to, because this is a really important job and they need me and there's no one else who can do this. I love you. That's not true. That's not true. There are other people who can step in. I understand having like really, really intense jobs, and I cannot speak for like every single position that there is, because I recognize some people are very specialized in what they do. But your life, how you live, how you feel about it, you're like we've been hitting on the quality of life. That's really what matters. And so you can do all of the shoulds that you could possibly think of, and you still maybe wind up in a space where you're like, wow, I shouldn't have done any of that. Yeah. And I think, Hattie, in from the optimism perspective, and I know for me, it took a long time to learn. I'm still learning. Yeah. There's always the opportunity to turn around, right? So I kind of use this analogy of, you and I are in a car and we're driving. Maybe we're going 70 west, and that's a common freeway in our area. And I ended up going over into the wrong side of the road, and I'm now driving 70 west in the 70 east. Oh. Right? Yes. And Hattie, you say to me, Eric, you're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way. You got to turn around. Well, Hattie, oh my gosh, you're right. I get over and back into the lane. But isn't it interesting, as we live our lives, there's those times where people say to us, you're going the wrong way. Think about it. You should turn around. You should turn around. Yep. Yes, we can look back on it and go, oh yeah, that was me back 10 years ago. Yeah, that was me. My point with bringing this up is that there's always the opportunity to turn around. Right. And that is a really optimistic. I need that. That's hope. That's hope. Yes. So I want to go to this next part of our report. I mentioned competencies at the beginning. In this model, inside of this assessment, is what we call competencies, and there's 8 of them, right? And just for the audience purposes, enhance emotional literacy, recognize patterns, apply consequential thinking, navigate emotions, engage intrinsic motivation, exercise optimism, increase empathy, and pursue noble goals.
obviously, I'm not going to take people through this model as exactly as it's laid out. Quite frankly, if you're in the audience and you'd like to take an assessment, reach out to us, and then we can go deep in that regard. But for the purposes of our podcast, those are the 8 competencies, right? And before we talk about scores, of those 8, Hattie, and I know you had some time to reflect after taking the assessment and getting the debrief, which of those, 1 or 2 or whatever, really leaped out for you, really resonated for you?
Oh my gosh, that is a really good question. I almost forget what was the. So what were the first 2? Because I'm not going to remember all of them.
That's all right. The first 2, enhance emotional literacy, and the second one was recognize patterns. And our last episode, the one that we did with you, we talked about patterns a lot. So I'm not trying to talk you into that one as being one of the ones that resonated. But
they all resonate because the thing is, like, for me, the whole concept of emotional literacy and things that you do that I'm so fascinated by and so passionate about now are still relatively new to me. And the only reason I know about them is because I was introduced to it for myself.
Right.
So, like, so I've been working on all of those things. Like, I've wanted to increase my emotional intelligence. I told you before, I thought that I really knew what I was talking about. And I did, but I didn't do it in the sense where it was reflected within me.
Yeah.
I was the friend that a lot of people would come to. I was the family member who would hear a lot of what was going on and maybe try to keep the water smooth and, everybody happy, or at least just give some kind of perspective from the way that I saw it.
Yep.
And then in news, obviously, you're constantly hearing and learning things and having to relate to people and understanding their life experience. So I had knowledge of it without really understanding what it was.
Yeah.
But to know that, like, my pattern recognition is better because I have so many patterns. So many. Like, they've been lifelong patterns, and they've got me to the point that I'm at. They got me to the destruction, to the destruction of my house built on sand.
Right.
Like, it was their patterns and cyclical behavior that got me there. And I don't say that as like a total negative thing, because I think when you hear like cyclical patterns and toxic behavior, you're thinking that, oh, this person must be really behaving poorly. Well, those things can be very subtle, actually. And you can totally not understand that you're doing them in certain, let's say, like in certain rooms or certain relationships, certain atmospheres where you have like those subtle behaviors that really don't serve you. So I felt, I did feel optimistic about those improving.
Can I clue you in, maybe as a reminder, and for the audience?
Yes.
Your highest scores were housed inside of those 2 competencies. So selfishly speaking, because as a practitioner, what inspires me is when people associate the work they've done in a certain area and the results that they have achieved.
Yeah.
Right? Again, this is not awards
right.
or losses or whatever you want to call for low scores, but I will say that that's one thing that leaped out to me is how high those were, and the fact that you had been putting in work. Because the beauty of EQ, and I know you know this, Hattie, is it's dynamic in nature. It's a learnable skill, so we can build it.
Yes.
I've used this idea about it's like muscle.
Right.
If you work the muscle, if you're lifting the weight, you will build muscle. I also think it's interesting is that how muscle is built is a process of tearing.
Right.
And resistance.
Yes.
Right? All of which our society tends to hate.
You got to rip yourself open in order to actually start to live your most authentic life.
Right. And because I do believe that I'm sort of in this non-dualistic mindset that there's multiple things that can be held in tension at the same time. Yes. Sometimes the weight sucks. Just it does. Yeah. But at the same time, there also can be an acknowledgement that thing you think sucks is also building you up.
Yeah.
And growing you. I really believe this, Hattie, and it's, I mean, I know in the psychological realm, maybe neuroscience, whatever, it's talked about as yes, this is fact. It's scientific fact. I'm hoping that as time moves forward, more and more people will understand that you may have seen this difficulty as your worst enemy, and why did it happen to me? Because it should happen to somebody else, whatever it may be. And maybe to reframe that a bit, I mean intentionally. Because, man, if you live long enough, you're going to have some storms.
Yeah.
And this idea that somehow the game is, how do I avoid the storms? I think it's akin to saying, how do I avoid the growth?
Right.
And we don't want that.
Well, and it'll come back for you anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just, you might as well just confront it, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Than wait to see how bad that storm is actually going to get.
And selfishly, and maybe that's not the right way to say it, just full transparency, I lived a good number of years of my life thinking about how I could find a way to get around the storm. I mean, I think I was that ultimate airline pilot, right? Oh, there's a storm on the horizon there to the east. Well, let me go a little bit up south and then come around, and then we won't have to go through it.
Right.
Not realizing, as from a human perspective, from a health perspective, you should go through it.
Nursery rhymes, they do have it figured out, if you think about it. You're like, you can't go under it, can't go over it. You got to go through it. I'll tell you what, those books, they set me up. I'm pretty sure that is literally
There's something there. There's something there.
This was the beginning of EQ. I told you last time that Curious George, real life Curious George. But if you read those books, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I should be proud of Curious Me. That's right.
I love it. So for our audience, and maybe even a reminder, refresh for you, Hattie, the definition around enhanced emotional literacy is accurately identifying and interpreting both simple and compound feelings. The recognized patterns definition is acknowledging frequently recurring reactions and behaviors. So once again, that really, really leaped out. So let's talk a little bit about something I've found to be true as a connector is navigate emotions, right? Yeah. So you scored really high in emotional literacy. It was actually your second highest score, right? But your navigate emotions was actually tied for your lowest score. And I know we talked a little bit about this in your debrief. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit from your perspective about that one, the navigating of emotions? Yeah.
And so I tend to, I hope it's not too abstract of a thought, because I can't necessarily say this is why I do this. There are a few reasons for why I do this. Just for everyone to know, I have complex PTSD. I have ADHD. I don't know what else is in there, but I did go to Brain Balance once, and the kind gentleman who did my assessment there was like, I said, so what do you think it is? He was like, oh, all the things. I would not want to be in your brain. And I just, it was endearing, honestly, but I was like, yes, I understand that, because it has been a struggle. There are so many different symptoms that I can experience at any given time that are emotional experiences.
Yep.
It's suspected that I have chronic Lyme's disease, and that impacts your brain too.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your emotions, it can kind of get really overwhelming up there.
Yep.
And so for me, I have quite the delay in my physical experiencing of emotions. Even if I know in the moment that something's happening, I will tend to feel a rush of emotion at first if it's something that's upsetting or whatnot. And I will immediately, I don't know if it's that I just shut my emotions down and I handle the situation, and then later on I process it. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if there's something that hinders me from being able to know what that emotion is right in the moment. Because I'm also very cognizant of not wanting to react to things. Gotcha. Because I understand that I've gone through enough that I do get triggered. It's not difficult to trigger me. And so I have to really be patient and slow with my response to certain things, sometimes to my detriment. because it'll linger on for too long. It'll almost get to the point where it's just I'm tabling it. I'm putting it on the back burner because I don't have time to really deal with it. And when I do that, what happens is I end up doing that with several things, and then it builds. And so then you get into the place where you have massive anxiety because there's so many things that are going on within you that you're not processing and getting above.
Is that a feeling of overwhelm in that case?
Yes. And so I'll feel incredibly overwhelmed. It'll be like I won't really know what to do next. I can acknowledge, okay, there's a lot happening. I'm not really sure what I feel right now. But I at least learned the whole idea behind the mind-body connection, and I'll recognize as long as I'm not in a massive overwhelm situation, I'll remember to stop, to slow down, feel where the emotion is in my body, and then remember, good news. Each emotion that you have really only runs about 90 seconds if you just sit and you experience it, like the waves. And they just come and go. And so, but I don't always remember that because I'm not always in the headspace of Hattie right now. If you get triggered and you have PTSD, you can go back to the headspace of Hattie in 2018 or 2012.
So as you say this, I think at least it comes out to me that your strength in this area of enhanced emotional literacy and recognized patterns, which is housed in a area that we call a pursuit called Know Yourself. Your Know Yourself is very strong, which allows you to be able to recognize. And I don't want to, I'm being suggestive in my impression.
No, you're helping me put it together.
Okay.
I'm like, I can tell you what I experienced. Now you tell me, you reflect that back to me. So I know.
So when I see that score, because one of the things I think will be beneficial for the audience to understand, the objective is not take an assessment and how high of a score can I get? That's not of really true value to you because then it becomes a game. Right. Then it becomes how do I so that I look a certain way, and it's like I can check the box.
It's the opposite of what you want to do essentially, because that's kind of like an old coping mechanism of how do I make myself look the best. It's not about looking the best.
Exactly.
It's about feeling your best.
So when you think about the navigate emotions, and I use the terminology or the phrasing of it was your lowest score. How does that impact you as it relates to what you want to do next as it relates to navigating emotions?
I want to learn how to handle it. I do want to learn how to handle it quicker for the mere fact that it does impact my life that it takes long to do this. And it can impact your decision making, and it can impact how you're showing up presently. So when it comes to, what to do next, for me, there's a lot in my life that is getting better and is improving. So I see that there's light at the end of the tunnel that makes it a little easier for me to implement some of the things that I have read that help with this. But for the most part, it gives me hope because it just backs up the way that I felt. I never felt I should say I did feel like I struggled there. It wasn't a surprise to see it. It was more like, okay, I see where I am, and I'm not going to compete with myself, but I also see there's room for improvement. And I do have a personality that is excited about like, all right, let's go. But I also know what this not an end game, but I know when you push forward in learning in this area, it's only a good thing.
Because it's dynamic in
nature.
Yeah.
You may experience somewhat of an unraveling, but I have experienced an unraveling. It's awful. It sucks. But as long as you know that as long as you keep going, you're not going to stay there. It's and you know that other people have done it too. I've done it. You've done it. We're still it's still a process too, even though we're sitting here talking about it.
Absolutely. So this kind of leads me to, I wanted to touch a little bit, and it connects to what you were saying, and that's about increased empathy. And, Hattie, a lot of times when we talk about empathy, we typically think of others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, Lord knows we need that in our society, in our culture. How about for Hattie? What does Hattie need most from Hattie as it relates to as she's navigating emotions? And when you think about empathy and the part that plays into it, what would you say to that?
I do. I have to talk to myself in such a way when things aren't going exactly how I want them to.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember to give myself the same compassion that I would want from someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and that I would give to someone else. And I've had like a few people in my life who have told me that when things are going on, they literally hear my voice talking to them. And when they told me that, I said, okay, well, maybe I should just hear my voice, because I'm like, I'll say things to other people. And I'll say it to, oh my goodness. Like, I will talk to my kids, and I really want to be an intentional parent who just teaches them and kind of walks with them through things, rather than you have to do this, you have to do this.
Right.
Of course, that still comes in. Like,
Sure does.
it's just, I keep trying to find a way around that one, but apparently no dice yet.
Yeah.
But when I explain things to them, and I actually give them like this intentional thought as to why we don't want to do this, or why we do this, or why we don't want to like treat your sister like that. We don't want to hurt her feelings. And no, we don't want to like, and I'm giving them all of this like, motherly advice.
Yep.
And I will say things out loud, and I'm not even kidding. And I'm like, yep, I heard that. I heard it. Because it was for me too, because there was something going on for me. And I'm like, well, that ruins my day and what I was thinking about with that. Like, where you think you're ahead on something, you're like, you're good. And you're like, oh, I just spoke truth into myself, and now I've got to do something about it.
Well, isn't it interesting? And as you had mentioned about your kids, and mine are now young adults, right? And when you come to like this epiphany, this aha moment, and for me, this was a little bit ago, it was about core beliefs. And the impact that they have on how we live, how we can typically carry them on into adulthood. And it was like, I just got this urgency to tell my son and daughter, it's like, you got to check your core beliefs. Mm-hmm. You got to check them, because I never did. Mm-hmm. I didn't do it until I was well into my adult years. And I said, it's an opportunity for you, because you might have developed that core belief to be a mechanism to survive the family unit. Mm-hmm. And remember, I wasn't the perfect dad. Yeah. I did what I thought was right. I did what I thought was the best at the moment. And even with that motivation, I failed sometimes. You can do better. Matter of fact, I want you to. I want you to be the better version of what I tried to be. Mm-hmm. And I think in that term, it kind of gave me something to go, yeah, that's right. I made a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. I didn't set out to make a lot of mistakes, but I did. Mm-hmm. And you know how I'm redeeming that is like, I'm coming to you, as in my son and daughter, you can do differently. Mm-hmm. You can check those. And you know that what I did was motivated out of love. So if I was motivated by love, yeah, I'm hoping you're going to cut me some slack and go, well, everybody, yeah, okay. We all do. My gosh, we all do.
Yeah.
And I think about it, Hattie, when you were saying that, when you're describing it, this idea of how we treat ourselves. And one of the things that I think is it's lacking and so in need of is that understanding that, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You know what I mean?
It is okay to make mistakes and to have not done it exactly the way that you really wanted to do it. Yep. It's okay that sometimes you're going to be triggered and you're going to default to old ways, especially when you talk about parenting.
Yeah. Because
I'll tell you what, there are so many people who are either going into parenting and they've got their perception of what it's going to be and how they want it to be and how great it's going to be. There's no way to prepare yourself for how hard it can be, because those challenges really, like, I think if you were to try to tell people, they'll be like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out once they get there, and then they'll have that compassion for you. That's for sure. Because I experienced that too.
Yep.
And then even knowing that there were certain things that I didn't want to do the same. You are going, when you don't know what to do and things are so overwhelming, you've got screaming, you've got like paint on the walls, you've got food on, you just stepped on something and you don't know what it is, but it was gross. And you're like, okay, am I going to look down? It's just, it's a whole thing. You will revert to ways that you've seen without even realizing that you're doing behaviors that you really didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But you understand now. Oh, now I get why they did that. Okay, but how can I actually change this so I'm not responding in this reactionary and emotional way?
Well, and that's a beautiful way of putting it, because I think there's this. We also, I think, need to recognize that we can rewire our brain. We can develop new neural pathways. I think sometimes we're so quick to believe that it's fixed, and it's not.
It's not. I have created new neural pathways. Super jazzed about it. Because again, the brain balance guy who told me, oh, whoa, you're jacked up.
Yeah.
He was also like, but the good news.
Good news. Right.
I see some new neural pathways in there. So you are generating, you are starting to rewire what had gone all out of the place or all over the place, I should say. And there are so many reasons for people's brains to start changing in negative ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes I don't even really know how exactly to explain what it feels like to rewire your brain, but there is a process to it. There is like a feeling of awakening as long as you are intentional enough with that process. Because I've had some pretty complex trauma, and that stuff's a little different than, you say you had a childhood, you were small, your parents, things that they did may have been scary to you, but they loved you. They weren't trying to be scary to you, but it ignited your nervous system. And so that stays with you in a certain way, and it can come out in various forms. But then you add in like very traumatizing events that you experienced, or chronically stressful periods of time where it's like you can't quite get out from underneath this rock that is keeping you down, because it's a big major life event that's really majorly impacting you. Those events, I can speak for women. I'm just going to say sexual assault because it happens so much more than what is really discussed. People don't like to talk about it.
Sure.
There's always questions of like, well, was it sexual assault? I don't know. I mean, there's so many different nuances.
Yep.
And public perception of it all and discussion over the years has changed. And I think that it's getting to a point where it's more understood, more heard than it was. But I think it's been a journey to get there. And from my own experience, I know that it reshaped my perception of myself. I know that it reshaped my confidence level, or how much I felt I deserved, or the level of purity. Oh my goodness, especially if you're thinking about like faith-based communities. If you think of anybody who's it is one of those things, whether you know that you shouldn't feel those ways or not. Again, you can tell yourself that you shouldn't feel this way and you should be in a different position.
Back to that.
But unless you actually take the active steps to rewire your brain, you're likely to stay there far longer than you need to.
I think there's also something that is important for those who are in relationship with the person who is developing the new neural pathways, right? And that's compassion and empathy.
Absolutely.
Right. And giving them space and oxygen, right? And I say the oxygen part because there is that tendency when someone says, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm working on, I want to fix. And to me, I equate fixing as like taking oxygen out of their room.
Yeah.
Right? Be there. listen.
Hold space.
Yeah. Interestingly, in your report, and you may remember this, that sort of the second half of the report is really the deep dive where it goes into each of the competencies in detail, right? Under the development tips for navigate emotions, I'm going to read some of this to you,
Okay,
Hattie.
let's do it.
Okay. This is a critical skill for you to develop. Developing and using your emotional literacy skills combined with your recognizing pattern skills is an important starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use your intellectual understanding of the way emotions function can be a bridge to managing them.
Mm-hmm.
And though you did not say that verbatim by any stretch, you really did describe. And that's the power of what this assessment can be. It's kind of that, it's another place to explore to help you as you are moving through this thing called life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that we always say, and we kind of allude to it as the good, better, best. The good thing is to take an assessment, right? And we don't do a ton of advertising here on the podcast, whether it's our assessment or another type of assessment, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. The better thing is to do some kind of work post-assessment
Yeah.
so that you can actually put something into action, right? Because if you don't put it into action, it just becomes an exchange of information. And more than likely, as human beings, what we will do, we'll revert and we'll just store it somewhere and say, yes, I remember doing that.
Right.
And the best is an ongoing relationship with someone who's helping you move to that place of behavior change, right?
Yes.
So all in all, when you look at this report and the experience, and not like, hey, it's a great assessment, but what do you think it's going to help you with on the go forward?
Well, I think one, it's like, I feel like encouragement is always important.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to see that I do have, I have skills that are helping me. We did talk about one of my strong suits actually potentially hindering or preventing me from one of my weaker.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was I'm good at weighing pros and cons.
Yeah, they apply consequential thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
So I can do that all day.
Yep.
But I'll keep doing that when I'm like, okay, well, you've already exhausted that part. We get it. You're good at that.
And Hattie, can we, and if we need to circle back into where you're going, because you just said something that made me think about life events, right? And this can apply to like work things. It could apply to like difficulties with relationships or whatever, but they can be catalysts for you to develop that muscle because it's almost I had to do that. And I know from what you've explained about your story is there were situations where consequential thinking, it's like, I got to do this. Am I close in that view?
Yes. When you say I got to do this, you mean like I was able to get to the decision that I had no choice but to do something?
Well, in respect to you needed that skill to help you as you were going through what you were going through. Right. Because what we have found, because keep in mind, everyone comes to the assessment with the resources, strengths, skills, whatever they have at that time, right? So some of that could be impacted by the fact that in that situation or situations, you really needed the consequential thinking to serve you. It can almost be construed to a degree as a survival thing, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's how you survive.
Right? So as that strength got very much more strong, if I can say it that way, that sounds a little off, but it can be a danger, right? Because you can get so good at one thing that it is a cost or a detriment to other things.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, if we look at it as a summed up, like say that's just essentially weighing the pros and cons of a situation.
Yes, right.
Well, that removes my sense of self. What do I actually need, or what feels good to me to do? Because and there are times where I will exhaust all the pros and cons, and then I will go to somebody else and ask them what they think. And they're like, this really is up to you. And I'm like, okay, that means I have to make a decision. And that sounds terrible because, because sometimes, and I'm a Libra, I don't know how far you go into like the whole horoscope thing, but if you read it, I'm like, okay, well, I got a tough time making some decisions here. So I'm like, that's just how, and I always joke about that. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm a Libra. It's hard for me to make these kinds of these choices. But then there's also like, I don't know what I don't know. And so some of this, it was totally brand new. I had no concept of certain areas in which I could grow.
Well, this is another reason why we advocate, we sort of recommend about not going it alone. An assessment just unto itself is good data collection, no doubt. But what you just described, I'm going back to Andrew Huberman from Huberman Labs, right? His idea about this thing called limbic friction. And basically it's describing that when we endeavor to do something different than we've done, the brain creates this friction. Yes. And it's resistance.
Yes.
It's like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. No, this is not.
And it's a physical feeling, too, in your head. Yeah. It's almost as if I would compare it to confusion sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you know that it doesn't feel natural to you because you have done things a certain way for a long time. That doesn't mean that they're the natural way of doing things. It means that's the coping, that's what you picked up, and that's what you stuck with because that's what served you for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And now the reason that you're coming to, now you want to make a different decision is because you recognize it's not serving you, but it's not going to feel good at first. You're going to feel as if you're entering enemy territory because you're like, well, this does not feel right to me because I would never do it this way.
Yeah.
But when you start trying it and you start seeing results, you start seeing things happen differently, then they start to happen differently more often. And you don't get faced with that same challenge of, I don't know what to do because whether it's rewiring your brain or just, I mean, it is rewiring your brain, but it's a physical thing. It's also, it almost feels like a game sometimes because you're like, this just feels so not what I would normally do.
Yeah.
Like, this is so uncomfortable.
You know what makes me think as well, because both you and I have this in common in that we have taken advantage of the power of therapy, right? I would recommend to anyone out there, our audience otherwise, if you're trying some of the things that we've mentioned today, if you hear this and go, okay, I'm going to try to build a new neural pathway. I'm going to look at my core beliefs. I think that's wonderful. If you find yourself in a ditch, if you're finding that you're not able to make it through, it could be helpful for you to get the kind of help that is clinical in nature.
Yeah.
Because I think that far too often, especially in the age of social media, oh my gosh, we have so many that are dispensing information as if I've got the answer and here it is for you and it should work for everyone.
Yeah.
Our approach is not that. I'd love it if people listening today could go, oh, I'm going to try that. And then they start and then it gets momentum and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. But I also know there'll be people that they'll go, man, I'm in the ditch again. And then, man, I'm in the ditch again. That's when maybe that's the call to, why don't you get even more help by consulting a therapist?
Well, and I just, I've been happy to see that the overall thoughts of having a therapist and getting mental health help, it has definitely improved in the last few years. It is more common, more mainstream. Our young people are amazing and they're just going right to it. They're like, no, I see you people and I am not trying to be there. Yeah. I'm just going to go straight to the source to make sure that I know what I'm doing. And I definitely give a lot of props to our younger generation in seeing things that they are not comfortable with and taking it upon themselves to just already start working on themselves. And
I think it's a both thing, right? I mean, it's like you can get that heavier lift help and you can still go with some of the self-directed things that we're talking about.
Some people don't need as much. Some people need a lot, and they need it over an extended period of time. I had a therapist who walked me through, what was a very detrimental relationship to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had her basically help rebuild me to an adult who can have a relationship. Now, it may still be difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still may hit little roadblocks where I really got to check myself and why I'm responding the way that I am. But I couldn't even begin to tell you, there are so many times, like if you get out of like what is an abusive relationship, I'll just use, and a lot of us go through really toxic relationships, so I don't necessarily have to use the word abuse, but good people don't. You can do bad things. It just happens. We're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And we do human things. We hurt other people. We don't necessarily mean to, but it happens. We have cycles. I never want anybody to feel bad about their poor behaviors or make themselves feel like they're the failure because their relationship isn't working out or it's hard.
Yep.
But having somebody there who you can say, okay, here's everything that happened. What can I say or what can I do or what would help me in this situation to navigate it so that I know that I'm not acting out or that I'm not being overreactive. I'm not being, basically triggered and standing in my coping mechanisms, which are self-sabotage.
Yeah.
You don't want to make it so that you don't want to set so many boundaries that you can't even be in a relationship with somebody. You need to be able to be open to it. And when you have been in a place where you're like, oh my gosh, I am not going to get hurt again. No way. Well, you're probably going to hurt yourself if you don't have somebody there with you who can see it from the outside perspective, because we can get really up in our feelings and our emotions, and it's good to be checked by somebody.
So, Hattie, as we're getting close to the close, and obviously we could keep going for a longer period of time. I always enjoy our conversations. So I've got a bonus question for you. What does Hattie need most from Hattie in this current frame?
I need rest, and I need continued compassion for myself, because that is the one that, as somebody who I've always been competitive with myself, I have always wanted to be the very best. And the problem with wanting to be the very best and pushing to be the very best in whatever it is that I've decided that I want to be the best at is not necessarily where I'm meant to be. Because that's my ego telling me I want this. Like, I could tell. Let me tell you about high school, Hattie, really quick. I know we don't have a whole lot of time.
No, go ahead.
But I could list it off and people would be like, okay, well, what's wrong with you? You seem to have had it made in your childhood. Oh, you were really good at soccer when you were young. Oh, you were captain of the cheerleading squad. Oh, you were on homecoming. Like all those things that like we loved and were so important to us when we were younger.
Yeah.
I was those things. I was class vice president. And then, I got a job in news and I went. And some things moved for me. They moved really quickly. And I would say that was because it was part of my purpose. The things that were moving, the things that were going well. But I got hit with a lot of roadblocks and things that I was not prepared for when I got to those success points. And so if you're working towards a goal, make sure you know why you're working towards it, because it shouldn't be just to make yourself feel good about yourself. Like you don't want to be at the top and then be there alone, lonely. And then you also don't want to get there and then be like, okay, what's next? Let me just push on through, because that didn't have the effect that I was hoping it was going to have. It was so important to me. But then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, well, that was nice, but now what?
Yeah.
And so I still get this, like, you got to move. You got to race forward. Like the clock is ticking. What clock? What clock?
I haven't seen that clock.
I mean, I'm used to
I always hear about it, but I've never seen it.
And when you're on air, though, yes, there is a clock typically. Yep, and they're like, Hattie, wrap it up. And I'm like, just one more thing, guys. And like, that's classic me if you were to talk to any producer that I've worked with. But you just, before you start pushing ahead to reach this goal, it's not going to make you feel better to be there if it's not your purpose. If it's not in line with what you're supposed to do in your life. And that to me, though, I still have a hard time with that, because I still be like, well, I've been working on myself really diligently for several years now. I'm like, and I just want to have all of these things in line so that I don't have to stress out about these other things anymore. But that's never going to be the case.
Yeah.
I have to be okay with where I am. And I remember talking to you a few months ago in this conversation where everything was going on with your family, and like it was very fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I'm just realizing that we just kind of have to, like, I don't know, you're like, it's just kind of like leaves, like floating through the air. You just kind of got to go with it.
Yeah.
And like kind of be graceful with it, because we love analogies. I can already tell you that from this conversation because we keep going in them. But if you think about like going out in the ocean and you've got like a high tide and you kind of get stuck out there and you want to get back to shore, you can't just keep pushing against it. They're like, no, you got to move to the side, and you might have to go a little slower because you don't want to run out of your energy. And then eventually you will get to shore. And you know what? If it's really hard to get there and you really continue to struggle, good news. There is a lifeguard, or there is somebody on shore who sees you. There's going to be somebody. It may not be who you want it to be, because that will happen too. And don't let it hold you back when the person you want to save you is not there, because they can't be. Not because they don't love you, but because you were also never theirs to save. You got to do it yourself.
And you know what? I think Hattie's pretty pleased with what you just said.
I love to say something really good. I also, after I say things, I'm like, okay, now do I take my own advice? Let's keep checking.
We'll check back on that.
Yeah.
So Hattie, once again, I am so grateful for your presence and your story, and I'm glad we were able to go over this assessment via a podcast, a first, and an awesome idea.
Well, and I want to say, because yes, you give these assessments and then you work with people afterwards. The work that you're doing through these assessments is life-changing for people. Mm-hmm. It is difficult, but you are a lifeguard in this scenario. You were out at sea. You struggled to get back. You made it. You still kind of venture out there sometimes, I'm sure, because life throws you, like, you have to go with the waves. You still got to go back in. But now, like, I think there needs to be an understanding that, yes, this is hard work for people on an individual level, but you're not there as a shame piece. You're there because you have been there, and you recognize the power in providing these tools and encouragement for people to have better lives, and for communities to be stronger because the people within them are doing the work to get there.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. So
visit the website.
That's Hattie talking, not me. And our producer knows that I'm typically not the one.
He's shaking his head. He's like, she's not supposed
But anyway, once again, thank you for being here. Yeah. And our audience, as always, we are glad that you are with us as well. And we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care. Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with The Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So yes. How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them. So reviews on all of the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
Do you think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones. And it's always good for us.
So we're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all right. But still,
not totally
we want
perfect.
We want your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that. Yeah. So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.